During Emperor Johannes IV's 18-year rule, his mission was to unify Ethiopia, much like his predecessor Tewodros II. While he had managed to defend the country against invasions from Egypt, Italy, and Sudan, it was the Italians who posed the greatest threat. You see, in the late 19th century, the scramble for Africa was in full swing. Countries all across Europe were jostling for control over vast swathes of the continent, with each nation looking to expand its territory and secure valuable resources. And with the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869, the Horn of Africa was now easily accessible, and the Italians saw Ethiopia as a prime target.
And he was responding to that, the attempt by the Italians to take over Ethiopia, to colonize Ethiopia. So the Battle of Adwa, as I say, end of February 1896, is a battle to ensure the continued independence of Ethiopia. That Ethiopia shall not be like all of these other countries which had become colonies of the West.
Menelik, on his part, had spent much of the previous 4 years building up a supply of modern weapons and ammunition, acquired from the French, British, and the Italians themselves, as the European colonial powers sought to keep each other's North African aspirations in check. But as the situation escalated, he was in desperate need of allies. He reached out to France for a treaty of alliance, hoping to secure support against the Italian invasion. However, the French abandoned the emperor in order to secure Italian approval of the Treaty of Adwa.
The Italians are willing to support Menelik in his enterprise, in part by giving him firearms, some which will be used against Italian soldiers at Adwa, because they're in effect sponsoring him. They think that if Menelik wins, if he topples Emperor Johannes and becomes Emperor of Ethiopia, he'll be their man. They will have been his sponsor when Menelik comes to power. He does what I think could have been predicted. He begins to separate himself from the Italians and carve out for himself a position as no longer as a southerner, but as the emperor of all the Ethiopian people. And it's from that position that he begins then to settle accounts with the Italians.
The second matter was they'd understood that you needed to be properly equipped with weapons. And so you have a very interesting situation as they are quarreling with that's the Ethiopian monarchy. As they are quarreling with the Italians, they were busy building very good relations with the French, with the Russians. The point that was made here by Professor Schobier about even in those early days, diplomats, emissaries from the African continent interacting with the rest of the world. The consequence of which was that the Ethiopians were able to arm themselves with modern weapons.
Despite being abandoned by all European nations in the face of the Italian invasion, Menelik did have one European ally, Russia. In 1895, a year before the war, Menelik sent his first delegation to Russia, headed by Victory of Adwa. The newspapers in St. Petersburg wrote, along with the expedition, Menelik II sent his diplomatic mission to Russia, including his princes and his bishop. Many citizens of the capital came to meet the train that brought Victory of Adwa and other members of the delegation to St. Petersburg. On the eve of war, an agreement providing military help for Ethiopia was concluded. As tensions with the Italians reached a boiling point, Emperor Menelik knew that he needed to act fast. On September 17, 1895, he issued a proclamation that would go down in history as one of the shortest and most powerful declarations of war ever recorded. With unwavering resolve, the emperor called upon the men of Shiwa to join his army at Ware Ilu. God, by his goodness in hurling down my enemies and extending my empire, has preserved me until this day. Until now I have ruled by the grace of God. As we all must die, I shall not be distressed if I am killed. Nevertheless, the Almighty has never yet forsaken me, and I am confident that he will not forsake me in the future. Enemies have now come upon us to destroy our homeland and to change our religion. They have crossed the sea which God has given us for a frontier. Considering that our flocks were exterminated and our people tired, I have not wished to do anything until now. But our enemies have begun the affair by advancing and digging into the country like moles. With the help of God, I will not deliver up my country to them. Ever a patriot of my country, I have never yet wronged you, and you have yet to wrong me, and I will never give you sorrow. Today, you who are strong, give me of your strength, and you who are weak, help me by prayer and by thinking of your children, your wives, and your faith. But if through treachery you refuse to follow me, take heed. You will hate me because I will not refrain from punishing you. I swear by the Holy Virgin that I will accept no prayer for your pardon. I leave in the month of Tekemt. Men of Shoa, go and wait for me at Wara Ilu. Let everyone be assembled by the middle of Tekemt.
Facing the common threats of Italian aggression, Emperor Menelik successfully unified his country's divided provincial rulers. In September 1895, he called for a mass mobilization and managed to assemble a force of approximately 80,000 to 120,000 troops. Men from nearly all of Ethiopia's regions and ethnic groups answered his call, demonstrating a remarkable display of national unity. The emperor himself mobilized some 35,000 troops commanded by his court officials. Meanwhile, his queen, the Empress Taitu, also mobilized her own force of some 6,000 men. The imperial army also included troops raised by governor-generals such as Ras Makonnen, the father of Ras Tafari Makonnen, later Emperor Haile Selassie I, who commanded some 12,000 troops.
And that unity is very important because the war that the Ethiopians had to fight against the Italians had to be carried by the people as a whole. It's not a matter of there's a professional army which must fight another professional army and the rest of the people is standing by. No. Because you've got the figure that's given is that the Emperor Menelik had managed to mobilize the people who actually went and confronted the Italians at Adwa were something like 100,000 people. Who really literally it's an army that must live off the land. So the peasants must supply the food, both for the people and for the animals, the horses and so on, and the donkeys that are carrying things. So the whole nation is united behind this. And they defeated the Italians at Adwa in 1896.
Menelik's greatest strength, however, lay in his knowledge of his own country and its people. He negotiated and convinced almost all of his nobles to fight for their country. He also launched an extensive counter-espionage campaign, feeding the Italians false information about the state of the Ethiopian nation. He was able to neutralize most of the Italian spies in Ethiopia, while his local allies provided valuable intelligence on Italian movements and plans. Unbeknownst to the Italians, most of their local allies were actually working with Menelik. He used the Italians' overconfidence and underestimation of Ethiopia against them. They consistently misinformed the Italians about the conditions and capacity of the Ethiopian state. They told the Italians that the people were divided along ethnic and tribal lines, playing on their prejudice towards Africans. They told them that national morale was low when it was at its peak. They informed them that grain and food supplies are running out when Menelik was storing huge amount of grain in Wollo. They told the Italians most of the army is deserting as 100,000 strong warriors were marching north. They even told them that they would defect as soon as the battle starts. Then, in 1893, with his control of the country finally secure and securing a promise of military aid from Russia, he denounced the treaty and declared it invalid. Italy escalated, seizing a shipment of Russian rifles. Then, in 1894, it struck deep into northern Ethiopia, seizing 7,000 square miles of territory. The Italians under General Oreste Baratieri stormed in expecting to exploit regional and ethnic divisions, then overwhelm with modern firepower. Why wouldn't they? Every report they'd received was that nobles were deserting Menelik, that the emperor was ill, and that as he rallied his armies, no one came.
At the same time, Italy had progressed to within roughly 250 miles of Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's newly established capital. In response, Emperor Menelik, along with Empress Taitu, led his forces northward on a grueling 5-month march that covered nearly 600 miles.
The Italians even approached the son of Johannes, Ras Mengesha, and offered to back his claim as emperor. They had expected disgruntled rulers like Negus Tekle Haymanot of Gojam and the Sultan of Ausa to join them. But in reality, the Italian invasion had solidified Menelik's hand and created the unity that he'd sought. Even his enemies were joining, realizing this was a fight for independence.
From late 1895 into early 1896, Menelik executed a masterful campaign that compelled the overstretched Italian forces to engage on his terms. By threatening to outflank the Italians and endanger Eritrea, Emperor Menelik skillfully maneuvered them into a precarious position, leaving their supply lines exposed and vulnerable to an increasingly hostile local population.
The ethnic rivalries between the Tigrians and the Amhara that the Italians were counting on did not prove to be a factor. Menelik was quick to expose the Italians' underlying contempt for all ethnic Africans, regardless of their individual backgrounds. The emperor pointed out the Italians' segregation policies in Eritrea, which applied to all ethnic Africans, not just specific groups. This revelation only served to further unite the Ethiopian people against the Italian invaders, fueling their determination to defend their country and their way of life. Finally, on March 1st, 1896, the Italian forces made their move. Against his better judgment, Baratieri ordered his troops to march towards Menelik's camp in the pre-dawn hours. He was misinformed that the Ethiopians would be attending church and would not fight on the Sabbath. But the Italians were in for a rude awakening.